I'm Lindsay on Flatiron School's Employer Partnerships team, and we're going to get started. Joining me today is 2019 grad Jon Harwood, application developer at IBM, here to talk about his journey to Flatiron School and his twists and turns along the way, and what he's up to now. Jon, thank you so much for letting us chat with you. Before we dive into what you were doing before, tell us the program you graduated from and what you're doing with IBM right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went through the online boot camp. Specifically, we were doing Rails and then React. So I started through IBM's apprenticeship program. So it was directly recommended through one of the reps there at Flatiron, and it was a year-long program. So because coming from the boot camp, we had already covered a decent amount of this sort of introductory material, made it pretty easy. The nice part was that it wasn't a hard structured program. So I was able to finish it up in about 9 months. And then once you finish the program, you were able to get on project work. So did a couple of small internal projects, mostly using React, a couple Angular projects. And, at the end of the year-long sort of program, we got the option to be converted to full-time employees. And so I took the offer, and it's what I've been doing ever since.
Wow. Sounds like it's been a good thing.
Yeah.
That's great. So take us back to pre-Flatiron days. What were you up to before Flatiron was a twinkle in your eye? Were you working? Were you studying? Were you doing both? Industry? Tell us what you're up to.
Yeah. So previously I had worked in food service, specifically in the kitchen. I had gone from college, sort of didn't really have much of an idea what I wanted to do, and found a job working in the kitchen and really loved it. So I moved out to Oregon with some family, and went to culinary school, did that whole thing. I was out there for about 6 years. And then as sort of what was happening with the West Coast, with housing prices, there's everything getting so much more expensive. It got to the point where I realized it was time to make the change. I've got family that's involved in tech. I've got a developer or two in the family. So they had recommended, sort of looking into boot camps. And a family member worked with a company whose developers had been sent through Flatiron and spoke very highly of the program. So that was sort of what it seemed like the best bet to properly change careers. Because I had done, a couple community college courses, online courses, things like that. They were great, but without having that sort of fundamental background in tech, at least, that it was not only going to be hard sort of just jumping in and learning all by myself, but then not having the connections within, the job search.
Mm-hmm.
I found very difficult. So that's basically sort of the culmination of what brought me to Flatiron.
Mm-hmm.
And, everything sort of changed from there.
That's just amazing to me. I think a lot of our alumni are incredible for this very reason of coming from such a different background and, seeing some interest in tech, but not knowing if, you're going to like it or if you're going to be good at it. And yet, going all the way in and then, putting all of your eggs in that basket and seeing what happens. So what were you thinking, I guess, in that process of, enrolling and like starting to take some community courses? Like, did you start to realize like, I like this? Or, like what was going on in your head at that point from the kitchen to a computer?
Yeah. So I'd done some very brief stuff growing up. It's a Visual Basic, some Quick Basic. So nothing too fancy, and definitely nothing practical nowadays. But the one overlap I would say is that, following cooking, at least you're following recipes, you're following instructions. It's very logical and ordered as much as it can be creative. How everyone ends up at that final solution, both in software development and cooking, may differ a little bit, but ultimately we're going for the same goal, is that everyone produces the same results at the end.
Mm.
And I've always enjoyed that, the sort of logical flow of things,
Mhm.
um, being able to sort of solve that puzzle. And then once you get comfortable, finding ways to solve it in more efficient, or, I guess, effective ways.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's more or less what drew me. Other than that, it was a field I know that was growing. Obviously it's not going away any
Right.
more than people eating food. So
Right. That's
good
so
stability, and it was provided more challenge than what I was getting in the kitchen.
cool. Oh, that's so cool. I'm gonna look at cooking in a totally new way now. Um, so you dive in, you took the online program, uh, took the online software engineering program, and tell us, what was it like sort of learning online? Did you find a community through our online program? What first week, like, what are your thoughts going into it?
Yeah. So it was honestly my first real experience with online learning, at least in a structured format. So it was intimidating at first, I'll be honest, sort of not really having a whole lot of experience and having to come in and sort of be ready to roll. But
Mhm.
our, I guess, squad lead, team lead, I can't recall, cohort, I believe.
Cohort lead, yeah.
Um, was really friendly, and made the whole process really inviting. Great group of people I went through with. I think there was about 7 or 8 of us,
Mhm.
um, and it was really nice. The lessons definitely had their difficulties. I enjoyed the test driven development side of it, because it gave a good expectation of what you were supposed to be doing in the lessons.
Mhm.
Uh, and then, anything you got hung up on, the both the cohort lead and the built-in sort of help desk folks through the lessons were very helpful at times, sort of understanding why things were doing what they were doing. Uh,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's we all finished up and actually did stay in touch. We formed a little Slack channel, and sort of had updates. I haven't talked to folks in a little bit, admittedly, but pretty much everyone sort of got their career started, and we'll randomly jump on a Zoom call, maybe once or twice a year kind of thing. But
Cool.
yeah, it's honestly, it was a very refreshing experience from sort of the not anonymity, but sort of not really knowing the folks you're talking to online,
Mm.
to where we all got to know each other and sort of what was going on in each other's lives, and it was nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think sometimes you think of an online learning program, like you said, is anonymous, it's independent, isolated maybe, and having that community of people to learn with probably helps your learning, but also just makes it more fun and
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
meaningful. Well, good. Well, so tell us about IBM. Tell us about what you're doing there as an application developer.
Yeah. So as an application developer, specifically, I'm part of what's called a CIC, which is a Customer Innovation Center. And we focus mainly on client contracting work rather than doing internal development work for IBM. Um, so there's a good side of that, which means that basically I get to propose myself to different jobs. I can, more or less influence what I'm taking in as far as work goes. Um, and the good part of that is that it means that I can sort of pick the stack, or at least try and apply to stacks that are appealing. It doesn't always go that way. So that's sort of the downside, is that you may find a stack you really like, and the project may end, and that's just the end of the project. So you have to find other work, and it may not be the exact same.
Mhm.
Uh, But I will say if you enjoy sort of experiencing different languages, that's definitely something to look into. And it helps to stay sort of current. I know it's very easy at times to fall into that. I know these languages and this is what I'm comfortable with, and I'm not moving out of the place where I feel good. So it can sort of help that requirement to learn. Um, but yeah,
Cool.
there's been large focus on moving into cloud, specifically hosted environments, and then recently AI. So
Yeah.
with IBM moving towards their cloud platform and their AI assistant,
Mhm.
just in general, sort of AI governance and how that's changing the way development works and just technology in general.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I feel like we would spend a whole hour probably talking about that. I want to touch on one thing you were just talking about though, and that we just briefly touched on before we started our chat today. You learned Ruby on Rails on the back end and JavaScript and React on the front end. Today we teach Python with Flask on the back end, still teaching React on the front end. Um, what did you learn, or what were you using in the apprenticeship program when you started at IBM? And what was that like?
Yeah. So for the most part, the languages we learned through the apprenticeship program were very similar. There was Rails. We did touch on Python. There was options to go further into them. I would say the majority of the work was in either React or Angular, as far as the front end was concerned, and then Java, C++, on the back end. A
Oh,
lot of enterprise clients are Java or C++ of some sort of flavor.
mhm.
Um, and then there have been a handful of Ruby clients. But yeah, that is unfortunately one of the things was, Ruby was sort of losing some of its share of
Mhm.
market as that transition was happening.
Mhm.
Um, so it's honestly it's I think one of my favorite languages, but
Yeah.
it's one that I've not had as much chance to use in my client work as it is. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Similar to Python, from what I understand, like easy to pick up, very readable.
yeah, I think that's definitely the key is that it doesn't look confusing. Um,
That's good. Cool. Well, I hope that's encouraging to those of you who are, you know, who have graduated from Flatiron School and are on the job search, looking at job descriptions and seeing new languages. You can do it, right? You've learned the basics.
yeah, and I would say the way that Flatiron teaches, I think sets you up well for being able to come in. And if you have a new language you have to learn, you sort of have those mental tools in place of how you need to break down, how these languages are structured, uh,
Mhm.
to be able to help you sort of assimilate that into your knowledge base.
Yeah, right. Well, let's get to some questions because I know we're already over halfway through. We've got a few. So we got someone at the top here. I come from a similar background, hospitality, into tech sales, and now data science. What are some key things to market that change to potential employers? I'm interested in getting into the entertainment industry. So like, let's see, I'm trying to clarify that question. So what are some key things to market about yourself with the background that you have in hospitality and tech, um, into maybe an entertainment industry?
Yeah. So for me, a lot of it was the soft skills that we learn in hospitality, sort of problem solving, conflict resolution, the how to deal with things that are not going the way that we think that they should. And even if, everything's on fire, so to speak, can you keep a calm head and sort of move things in the direction they need to be to smooth things out? Um, interpersonal skills, especially, working with other people as closely as you do in food service or just service industry in general. You get a good sense of how how to deal with people both that you do like and don't like. And
I
that is
bet.
something that I think can be very helpful in a corporate environment just as much as, the kitchen.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. Yeah, at the end of the day, we have to build relationships with people to get things done. Great question. Another one was the IBM apprenticeship program a paid apprenticeship?
It was. I believe it started hourly and then um, once the apprenticeship program ended, they converted you to a salaried employee.
Great. Great. All right. A question from Ben. Were you applying elsewhere other than IBM? And if so, how was that process in terms of working out for you? So what was, I guess, the job search like?
Yeah. Um, yes. The answer is yes. I was applying to a lot of places. I unfortunately am still getting random emails and calls occasionally from some of the probably maybe less scrupulous job recruiting sites that I've dumped my information into. But I will say this, it's good to apply to what you want, but it's also good to just apply to things that you think you'd be a good fit for.
Hmm.
Uh, the process, I think, was about 2 or 3 months.
Mhm.
And the apprenticeship program was not the only one I had responses from, but it was the one that seemed like the best fit. Um, Especially given that, I was coming in with no background whatsoever. It was helpful to have sort of that leg up into, a well-established company where I could start to build my resume. Um, so I can't speak to, what the process may be at a smaller company, but at least for, something larger like IBM, it was pretty well structured. Nothing too crazy, nothing Amazon or Google level of interviews, but it was generally technical. And I think to the point that they know what they were looking for and that, people who were coming into the industry specifically, I think they were targeting people who had career swapped
Hmm.
bringing in people in tech.
Yeah, that makes a big difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it does.
Yeah. Well, we got another question from Joseph. He says, amazing background story, and it's motivational to hear your transition. I'm in the cybersecurity engineering program at Flatiron, and I'm curious about the intersection of application security and DevOps. How do security teams collaborate with development and operations teams at IBM? Wow, what a great question.
So in general, my experience has been more along the lines of I'll get contracted to a client, and then I'm generally dropped into a team on the client side of things. So DevOps and in infrastructure in general is often handled by the client, whether it be through other IBM contractors or through self hires, third parties. Um, but as an application developer, I've had little actual influence on infrastructure and security outside of developing secure code. Um, I'm more or less in contact with the DevOps team, but I've not been placed on a DevOps role specifically. So as far as I can speak to, we work very closely with them, especially once you're outside of your local environment. Having to get instances set up if you're running things from a cloud standpoint. Uh, that's all being handled by another team outside of the development side.
Hmm. Got it. Okay, great. Thanks for the question, Joseph. If y'all have other questions, pop them in. I'm gonna go back to our what you mentioned earlier about AI. You know, we've seen a huge boon in AI since you graduated. Can you speak a little bit to maybe advice you'd have for someone coming out of a boot camp? Uh, in like, how do you think about the use of AI? Just open thoughts. Like that's a very open question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, So it is everywhere, and I can only see that growing, probably exponentially in the next 5 to 10 years. Um, I know that most places, at least that I've contracted with, or even through IBM, have relatively strict policies when it comes to code generation. I know IBM and the client I'm currently working for have very strict policies where nothing, we cannot use generative AI to help write code. And I think because of that, it's not a tool that I've accessed a whole lot in my current work, but
Mhm.
I know the power of it is definitely there, especially for sort of abstracting away some of the more menial part of the job. Um, Nobody really likes writing boilerplate stuff over and over again, so I can definitely say it can be helpful. But as it much as it can help, it can kind of become a crutch if you use it too much. I Only other thing I'll say is that it does seem to be a lot of what the industry is pushing towards. So, any sort of certification, um, especially, cloud certifications. And I don't really know exactly what certifications are available communally as far as AI goes, but that, the corporate world loves the term AI.
Yeah.
So, more things that you can put on a resume that sort of chime into that,
Mhm.
and being able to speak to it, especially in sort of like an interest or even just sort of a knowledgeable reference, can
Mhm.
be good, especially during the interview processes.
Yeah, I can see having a somewhat established, even if loosely, point of view about how to use AI, when to use it, the tools that are available to you as a developer, things like, GitHub's Copilot and other tools like that could be
Exactly.
helpful. And like you said, it's kind of a buzzword. So
Yeah.
finding ways to thoughtfully input it into, your resume or application could be advantageous, as long as you can speak, more behind the page, so to speak. All right, another question. We've got, are there any specific skills or languages that you feel would be smart for a recent Flatiron grad in software engineering to learn that would help or give us a leg up in terms of employment in today's market?
Yeah, I mean, I would say Python is a really good one. It may be more geared towards data science, in a practical application sense. If you're interested in sort of staying full stack, React and Angular, definitely, specifically with TypeScript for Angular, and then .NET Suite or Java. Um, Spring with Java if you go that way. I'm not very familiar with .NET, so I will be honest, I'm not entirely too sure what to recommend on that end. But I'd say about 50 to 60% of the jobs I see out there have some sort of Java component.
Yeah,
It's big as far as enterprise clients go.
right. Yeah, it's been around for decades.
It's like JavaScript. I don't think it's going anywhere.
Yeah, yeah, it's a safe bet. Great. All right, thanks for that question. And then another one from Joseph. What are the most common vulnerabilities you encounter in web applications? As a contractor, do you ever find yourself having to educate clients about these vulnerabilities and their impact?
Um, Generally just bad practices, not sanitizing inputs, things like that. Uh, I haven't had to personally, luckily. Um, a lot of the projects I've been on have been sort of long standing, and I've come in after the fact. Um, I have seen things that are definitely unfortunate in code, but nothing specifically that stuck out as a security vulnerability. Um, it we don't really perform much more than integration and unit testing, so pen testing and things like that. Um, wouldn't really come up on my end, but I do know that, obviously, when this day and age with data security being as paramount as it is, and the implications for a company if they have a data breach, it's definitely top of the mind for any application, from a top view down. it has to be secure. So best practices generally are being enforced. I won't say they are always enforced, but definitely worth making and keeping mind of. More so for development side is making sure that you're up to date with things like packages and, getting security vulnerabilities patched.
Nice. Great. Well, we're coming up on our time here. I've just got one question, which is, what are you cooking these days?
Honestly, a lot of Italian. It's mostly Italian and French was sort of where most of my cooking went.
Mhm.
Uh, so, pasta dishes are also relatively cheap and hold pretty well.
Yeah.
It's just me, so unfortunately, some of the recipes are a little bit large, and you got to really like what you're cooking because you're eating it for a couple days. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, can't go wrong with Italian and French cuisine. It's a carb city, and that's what I love. Give
exactly.
me the carbs and the
Butter,
butter.
cheese, all that stuff.
Yes, yes. Well, it's such a pleasure to talk with you, Jon, and hear more about your journey into tech. Thank you so much for sharing with us. And if folks want to connect with you after today, where can we find you?
Um, I have a GitHub, but honestly, I haven't been very active on it.
Okay.
Yeah, feel free to share my email. I don't know if that's something I can do through here, or if you want to share that, feel free to reach out. I'm on LinkedIn as well, if that's
Yeah.
easier. The
How about
same
LinkedIn?
name. And I have spoken over the couple of years with a handful of Flatiron graduates. So feel free to reach out. Email, LinkedIn, whatever
Awesome.
you prefer. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I dropped your LinkedIn URL there at the end. Just make it easy for folks. And I think that's it. Thank you again. Have a great afternoon. Stay cool out there. And thank you all for joining us. We'll send out the recording in a couple days and hope you all have a great week.